Morning. There you are. Good morning. I hope there's somebody there, because we're all here again. I tell you, it doesn't seem long ago since last we were here either. I have made the most startling discovery. There is a bird which sits in the middle of the television centre at White City and sings its head off from 4 o'clock until 6. It was my boon companion for our 2 brief, fleeting hours of rest. Now, let us get back to where we were at whatever time it was we left you, and look at the state of party board, if we may. There it is, Labour, with 303 seats, 42 gains and 1 loss. Conservatives, 151, with no gains, which was a remarkable thing, as Robert Mackenzie was saying half the night, and 43 losses. The Liberals, with 5 seats, 2 gains, 1 losses. Others, that's the Speaker, a man from Ulster. So there are 2 seats there, 1 gain and no losses. Now, if we can look across to the party lead board. Party lead board, the Labour lead over the Conservatives were 152. Results were declared 461, and we expect 169 results to come throughout the day. Now, let's begin. Robert Robinson has been looking at the papers for us. What do they all say, Bob?
Good morning. The papers are jumping up and down like children with a front seat at the circus. Can't blame them, really. Smash Labour win, says the Mirror, unashamedly emotional. Yes, it's a Labour landslide, chimes in the Sun, though the yes sounds as though it still felt there might be a possibility of a no. A landslide for Labour, says the Sketch, going on to report that even though Mr. Heath went to bed without saying he conceded the election, he'd implied as much by announcing that he would conduct the opposition in the next Parliament vigorously. And for those who prefer prose to rhetoric, The Guardian says, in as plain terms as you could wish, Labour back with big majority. But The Guardian allows itself a touch of dramatic licence when it says a little lower down its front page, Mr. Wilson conceals his glee. The basis for this deduction appears to be the following incident. Just before the count was announced, Guardian says, he shook hands with his Conservative opponent, Dr. Hobday, and in defiance of all the non-smoking signs, offered him a light for his cigar, kindling his own pipe at the same time. His other opponent, screaming Lord Such, got in on the act, producing a pipe of his own, which he appeared unable to smoke. Naturally, the human element is well to the fore. Mr. Heath puts up a brave face, says The Guardian. The Mirror reports that Mr. George Brown had a working breakfast of bacon and eggs, that Mr. William Johns, an early voter at Redruth, Cornwall, is 102. The Mail has an extremely melancholy picture of Lord Snow apparently leaving the corridors of power, and the Times announces that the nation was taking the ritual seriously. Away from the news pages, which after all can only repeat what's already been heard on radio and television, the Daily Worker and its leader says, vote with your feet, referring to an Easter peace march, and the Sun says, what a relief it's over. Seems to have been with us for months. The Telegraph says, prosaically but undeniably, it may not have been a great or inspiring election campaign, but at any rate, it was a fairly clean one. Incentive and compassion, there's the motto for the new administration, clangs the Express, as though it's still on the soapbox that everyone else has put back in the prop cupboard. The Financial Times thinks, not unreasonably, that as far as Mr. Wilson's concerned, the real test for him is still to come. And the Times leads the paper with the words, so the Pope will not, after all, visit Poland in May. Henry Fielding in The Sun, the only gossip columnist who doesn't seem to speak in grunts, proclaims his disaffection for the whole affair by dropping the vowels from any words that refer to the election. The day the Prime Minister announced the date of the election, he says, I fell down in a dreadful fit of boredom. The Mail, committing itself to the dramatic and individual, allots a whole page to the man who stood against Mr. Wilson, the man who stood against Mr. Heath, and the man who stood against Mr. Grimond. See them now, it seems to imply, before they're devoured in the flames of martyrdom. The Mail spends another full page on the man, Mr. Russell Butler, who did his best against Mr. Heath. Mr. Butler, the Mail reports, put up an 8-foot-high oil painting of himself in the front garden of the Labour Party HQ at Bexley Heath. According to the Mail, Mr. Heath's lot said, we don't go in for that sort of thing. And the Liberals said, rather sadly, no, we haven't got a portrait in the front garden, we haven't got a front garden. Among the news that's undeniably news, but not really worth reading, is the intelligence in the Daily Sketch that at Orton Longueville, near Peterborough, Judith Cole went to vote in a wedding dress, and a couple in Swansea went to the polls with a Conservative sticker on the front window and a Vote Labour one on the back. The cruelest quotation of the whole election, perhaps, appears in most of the papers. The Financial Times has it down page on the front. Asked whether he would miss Mr. Henry Brooke in the next Parliament, the Prime Minister replied, was he in the last? The Times, as it announced the other day, is going to print news on its front page, but for those who take a liberal view, liberal with a small L, that is, of what news actually is, the Times has been printing news on its front page for many a long day, and this morning's no exception. Though all around are acknowledging with great force that Labour's won the day, the Times still finds space on its front page for a Mr. Charles Walton to announce, with regret, the untimely death of his car in Ostend on March the 19th.
Well, now, the newspapers were in fact recording that somewhere in the middle of the night we crossed a great watershed in British politics. After spending 3 years or more on the brink, as it seemed, always of the general election, we now face a settled period of 4 or 5 years, settled period of government and, indeed, a Labour government. And Mr. Wilson, of course, a moment of great triumph. His timing of the election has been supremely confirmed, and he is himself now in an utterly powerful position for anything that he wishes to do in the way of redistributing the cabinet and indeed with his own party. As far as the Conservatives are concerned, Mr. Heath, after a pretty searing experience in the campaign, has emerged with increased stature, but there's no doubt from the results that we have that the Conservatives now face a major job of reconstruction, because over the night we saw a tremendous shift of political power. Remember, this is where the Parliament stayed at the end of the last Parliament with a majority of 3. During the night, we got a swing of 2.9% up to about there, right up to there, giving eventually a Labour majority of 100 when all the results are in.
Now what we shall do is go and join David Holmes, who's over at the southeast desk, and bid him good morning too. David Holmes.
Well, good morning once again. I'm here to tell you the story of the night in one particular region, your region, the southeast region. Now, first of all, the swing, which Ian Trappan was talking about just now, 2.9 over the whole country, was a little higher than that, something just about 3%. We got it up on the swing meter here, just about 3. Our regional swing was somewhere just below 3. All the same, out of the 42 seats which Labour gained throughout the country, 17 of them, that's not far short of half, were down here in the southeast. The reason for that is simply that the outskirts of London, the area around London, contained the greatest concentration of Conservative marginals in the country. All the seats that should have fallen to the prevailing swing did fall, except one that stood up strongly against the prevailing wind. That was Hendon North, where Sir Ian or Ewing held the seat. But nearby, Labour turned out Commander Courtney from Harrow East. They turned out Henry Brooke from Hampstead. Labour turned out Christopher Chataway from Lewisham North, his neighbour from Lewisham West. And they turned out Douglas Smith from Brentford and Chiswick, and Charles Curran, all very well-known Conservative characters, these, from Uxbridge. But these last 2 seats only just by very slim majorities to Labour. Then over in Kent, Dame Patricia Hornsby-Smith was out from Chislehurst, and on one side of her, Mr. Heath did hold his seat at Bexley, but with his majority halved, and on the other side of Chislehurst, Eric Lubbock held Orpington for the Liberals, but with his majority pretty well halved. Incidentally, Orpington registered the country's highest turnout, about 87%. But I'm afraid the South East also registered the United Kingdom's lowest turnout in Stepney, under 51%. Now, other Labour gains inside Greater London were Croydon South, Norwood, Ilford South, Walthamstow East, and Hornchurch. And outside London, Labour took Billericay, Eton and Slough, Reading, both of those last ones with thumping swings, and for the first time ever, Labour took Oxford. I leave out only the seat which we were certain Patrick Gordon-Walker would win, Leighton. Then Labour did hold Brighton, Kemp Town, but Dennis Hobden's only increased his majority from 7 to 831, and that was only after a recount, so it's still very marginal. And left-winger Anne Kerr did slightly put up her majority at Rochester and Chatham against what some people had expected. Incidentally, her husband, Russ Kerr, is now Labour MP for Feltham. I mentioned the Liberals just now in places they held on, in Hastings, for instance, and Farnham. But elsewhere, the Liberals lost votes heavily in East Surrey. Their share was down nearly 12%. So that's the end of the report from the South East.
And now for an interview with one of those London winners that was mentioned then by David Holmes. It was the Labour winner at Leighton, Patrick Gordon Walker. He was interviewed by Michael Charlton very soon after the count.
A loss last time of nearly 8,000 into a win here at 8,000 at Leighton. Well, so what do you think made the difference this time? Well, how do you account for this?
Well, everything was different this time. The weather, the climate of the populace, of the people here. I understood why they felt as they did in the by-election, but they've changed, and I think the people of Leighton are just beginning to take me to their heart, and I hope this will go on.
You look a lot happier tonight than you did last time.
I
anyway.
certainly am. I've enjoyed the campaign all the way through. It's been a very good campaign.
Now, what do you feel about Smethwick? Smethwick went back to Labour tonight. Now, what are your feelings about
I'm
that?
overjoyed about that. I knew it would happen. I didn't think it would happen, I must say, by quite such a big majority. But I knew Smethwick, with very decent people, would come to their senses.
Do you think you could have won it this time?
I think I could, but it was better to have a change. This was wise.
Now, what do you think you're going to go back into Parliament as, Mr. Gordon Walker?
Well, as member for Leighton.
But what else, perhaps?
I don't know.
Well, the Prime Minister has said he may be setting out the post of Minister for Europe. Now, if he offered you that, would you accept it?
No, you mustn't ask me that sort of question. You're not the Prime Minister.
But, I mean, you wouldn't be averse to accepting an office like that.
My broad view is that if you're asked to do something for the party, you do it.
And so the former Foreign Secretary goes back into the House of Commons after 17 months, and I almost said in the wilderness. And into the studio last night came Mr. Quinton Hogg. Mr. Quinton Hogg in great form.
The Conservative Party has been so decisively rejected, assuming this trend continues?
I think for one very simple reason. Wages have gone up faster than prices, and people haven't yet ascertained that they've borrowed the difference.
Do you think that their failure to ascertain this is due to the inadequacy of the Tory campaign or the stupidity of the people?
I don't know. I did my best myself.
Do you think the Tory campaign was inadequate in any way?
I can't criticize the national campaign. I only know I did my best myself.
What do you think will be the effect on the Tory party now? Will there be a great rethink? Will there be a great deal of argument, post-morteming, or what?
Not a very keen man on post-morteming. I think you've got to pick yourself up and dust your trousers.
And what does that involve inside the Conservative Party, dusting trousers?
Certain amount of the ordinary military virtues of defiance and defeat.
Well, we hope that Mr. Wilson shows you magnanimity, which I think is the other phrase there, isn't it?
Most unlikely that he will, from what I know of him.
Now, you are how old now, Mr. Hogg?
58.
And if there's no Tory government in until 1970, it's a long time for you to be in opposition still, isn't it?
Long time to live in front of me, I hope, and God being willing.
Do you regret giving up your peerage?
No, I always intended to.
And what part do you intend to play in the coming Parliament? Do you want a big role in opposition, or do you want to drop out of front bench politics?
This depends on what others think, not what I think. I shall play as big a part as God allows me.
And how big a part do you think God will allow you?
You must ask him.
Well, so far as I know, he's not on our list of people to be interviewed.
No, you'd have to pay him too big a fee.
Oh, I don't know. The BBC can afford it. Thank you very much, Mr. Hogg.
I told you Mr. Hogg was in very good form last night. Now look at the state of the party's board. Well, the time is now 6:48, coming up to 6:49. Let's go and join, I think it's Michael Aspel up there in the newsroom.
Well, it is. Good morning. The main news abroad, the terrorist attack in Saigon during the night, with at least 6 people killed and more than 80 others injured. It started when a group of Viet Cong attacked an American officer's billets just before dawn, killing 3 guards with machine gun fire and hand grenades. The terrorists then drove up a truck packed with explosives, and the blast, when it went off, tore out most of the first 2 floors of the building, where more than 150 Americans were asleep. Military police and other rescue workers found 3 bodies in the rubble and helped the survivors out of the shattered building. It's feared that others may still be trapped. And now the world's reaction to our election results. For people in the United States, the issue here had been decided even before their normal bedtime. From New York, Gerald Priestman reports.
In their late-night shows by satellite from London, American TV commentators called Mr. Wilson the British Lyndon Johnson, a political giant, Texas style. The shows, by the way, came from the BBC's election centre and in colour. Another of the commentators remarked, it cannot be disappointing to Washington to have the prospect of another 5 years of the by now familiar Mr. Wilson, Mr. Stewart and Mr. Healy. And I think that's a very fair assessment of the reaction the White House might be shy to put into words. Many Americans who followed the campaign were struck by the heavy turnout, in their terms, and by Mr. Wilson's presidential approach. But today's New York Times wonders whether Mr. Wilson will be radical enough and hopes that he'll come round to the Heath view that Britain's future lies in Europe.
In Europe, the election made the main headlines in most of the Paris newspapers, with one correspondent describing the result as a turning point in British history. Political observers in France forecast that a strong Labour government would reduce the chances of Britain joining the common market in the next few years, a theme repeated in West Germany. Television commentators there talked almost exclusively about what Mr. Wilson's attitude to Europe would be. In Northern Ireland, 20 policemen stood by as the polls were closing at Cormean near Armagh, after stones and clods of earth were thrown at people on their way to vote. Police reinforcements were called in after part of the crowd tried to overturn a car used by Republican election workers. Another Republican car in South Armagh was slightly damaged. Officials are meeting at Moscow Zoo this morning to discuss the next step in the case of the reluctant pandas. There'll be talks about whether London Zoo's Chi-Chi may stay in Moscow until the autumn to mate with Anand, the Russian zoo's panda. Keepers had to rush in with brooms yesterday to stop them from fighting after they'd been put in the same cage together for the first time. Soccer, and Chelsea are safely through to the FA Cup semi-final for the second year running. Following their 3-1 defeat of Hull last night, they'll next meet Sheffield Wednesday in 3 weeks' time. Manchester United's semi-final opponents depend on the outcome of the Manchester City-Everton match. Tennis, and the Mexican Pancho Gonzalez won the BBC Two World Professional Championship at Wembley last night. In the semi-finals, Gonzalez beat Ken Rosewall, 6 years his junior, 13-11. And Lou Hode lost to his old Australian rival Rod Laver, 3-10. So to the best-of-3 sets final, with Gonzalez serving against Laver for the match. After a match lasting nearly 2 hours, Gonzalez walked off as winner of the championship with prize money amounting to £2,500. That's all the news for the moment. Now back to what I'm sure must be Cliff Michelmore.
It is indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Michael Aspel. And now a look back on how the two party leaders spent the historic night, at least as we saw them on television. Mr. Edward Heath, the loser, and Bexley and Kent, his constituency, Mr. Wilson, the victor, at Huyton in Lancashire.
Of the Huyton election of 1966. It is signed by me, Donald Wilgus, the Deputy Acting Returning Officer for the Huyton constituency. The total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was, for Thomas Lerion Hobday, 20,182 votes. For David Edward Such, 585 votes. For James Harold Wilson, 41,132 votes.
Mr. Wilson's majority, in my very quick calculation, is just up. The vote does seem to have been slightly down. It's a 21,000 majority compared with 19,200 last time.
Mr. Wilson, are you now prepared to claim that you will definitely be the next Prime Minister, that you will remain Prime Minister?
I think we'll wait for the final results to come in. As soon as one party's got 316 seats in the House of Commons, I will say that party has won.
You'll make no claims before then?
No.
Any results given you special satisfaction so far?
I was quite pleased about the result in Huyton. I think it's proved that, I'm afraid, that the more I'm away from Huyton, speaking in the country, the bigger my majority. I think that's a tribute to my supporters who worked so hard to get me back.
Wasn't the election was called by many people, in the press anyway, tawdry and boring? Looking back on it, do you think there's anything in these criticisms?
I think it got a bit boring. I think our opponents made the mistake of getting up to fever heat from the first day, and I think the fever heat was a little bit synthetic. And we just went on quite strongly with the line that we were putting in the election. I don't need to repeat it, I've said it so often. I don't think it got very tawdry. I think there's a lot of abuse, which I decided not to reply to. But most people, I think, have thought very seriously about this election. And although I think television played a big part in boring the electorate, as it certainly did, I think television has equally, over the years, played a big part in getting the electorate interested in the issue so that they pretty well knew how to apply their minds to the election before the election began.
A criticism was that the election was slightly unreal because if a serious economic crisis does confront the country, political leaders did not wish to talk about it for fear of damaging the pound.
I talked about nothing else throughout the election, and this is certainly true of our leading opponents. On the other hand, I think there was a real awareness of the economic problems that we have been facing, and I made it very clear that we are still facing economic problems despite the very considerable progress we've made. I think what the result so far, so to say in Huyton, shows is that there's a great deal of confidence in the country in the ability of this government to weather any storms that might arise.
Ladies and gentlemen, the returning officer, the Mayor of Bexley, will now declare the results, and we can be grateful if you'll kindly let the full results be declared before there's any sort of demonstration.
I hereby declare that the votes cast at this election are as follows. Butler, Russell Leon, 24,044. Heath, Edward Richard George, 26,000.
Mr. Heath holds the seat with a much reduced majority.
307.
The leader of the opposition is back with a much reduced majority.
Lloyd Richard Faulkner, 4,405. And that Edward Richard George Heath is elected as member for the Bexley constituency.
Great excitement, much anger from the Labour supporters who are coming to the hall. Much anger, quite good-natured anger, and a not very broad smile from the leader of the opposition. We can't be too happy about that majority.
Mr. Heath, it does appear that you and your policies have been fairly decisively rejected at this election. Why do you think this has happened?
Well, I think they're the right policies. I think the Labour Party has been fighting the election on the past. We've been fighting it on the present and the future. And I believe the electorate will come to realize their policies are the right ones. I agree that there are new policies in many respects. It's the first time, I think, that an election has been fought in this country on reforming the trade unions, on bringing the welfare state up to date, and on the clear issue of going into Europe. But I believe they're the right policies for the future, and I'm quite certain the people of this country are coming to realize it.
You're saying that the Conservative Party is losing this election because it is ahead of the Labour Party in its thinking and ahead of the British public?
That may well be the case, but we are ahead of public opinion on this.
Mr. Heath, you took the major burden of the actual campaigning, particularly the television campaigning, into your own hands. Do you feel that you were perhaps mistaken to do this?
No, I don't think, I have no regrets about the campaign at all. But of course my colleagues were also playing an enormous part in the country. I think the way in which the campaign was covered on television and in the press made it appear that the emphasis was perhaps on the leaders of the parties. But this doesn't alter the fact that my colleagues were playing an enormous part both on television as well as meetings up and down the country.
One got the impression sometimes that they weren't always giving you that wholehearted support that might have helped.
I wouldn't agree at all on that. I wouldn't agree at all.
Would you fight again in this rather American presidential man-to-man, you versus Mr. Wilson style, or would you adopt a different type of campaign?
I wouldn't, I think, change the campaign in any way at all. Of course, it was my first campaign as leader. I've only been leader of the party for 8 months. It was therefore essential that I should go to every part of the country and that I should speak in every area and in as many of our large cities as possible. This I did. I also spoke in a large number of smaller towns and villages on the way to the cities. And, of course, I dealt with the press conference every morning. This meant, of course, in Bexley, I couldn't carry out my usual complete canvass of every house in the constituency. I spoke at 6 meetings, but I couldn't do any canvassing. And so I'm delighted with the result here in Bexley.
And now let's take a look at the state of the party's board and the party lead. Here they are. State of the party. Labour, 303, with 42 gains and 1 losses. Conservatives, 151, no gains and 43 losses. And here is Labour lead over Conservative, 152, with 169 results to come. And now it's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, we shall be bringing you this kind of service throughout the morning until the results start to come in. And for those of you who have either gone to bed too soon or at that boxing, let's take a quick look on how the 2 leaders reacted as we saw them on television last night. Mr. Edward Heath, the now obvious loser, was down in his own constituency in Kent, and the winner, the victor, Mr. Wilson, was up in his constituency in Huyton. So let's first of all go and see how Mr. Wilson's declaration went.
The Huyton election of 1966. It is signed by me, Donald Wilgus, the Deputy Acting Returning Officer for the Huyton constituency. The total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was, for Thomas Lerion Hobday, 20,182 votes. For David Edward Such, 585 votes. For James Harold Wilson, 41,132 votes.
Mr. Wilson's majority, in my very quick calculation, is just up. The vote does seem to have been slightly down. It's a 21,000 majority compared with 19,200 last time.
Mr. Wilson, are you now prepared to claim that you will definitely be the next Prime Minister, that you will remain Prime Minister?
I think we'll wait for the final results to come in. As soon as one party's got 316 seats in the House of Commons, I will say that party has won.
You'll make no claims before then?
No.
Any results given you special satisfaction so far?
I was quite pleased about the result in Huyton. I think it's proved that, I'm afraid, that the more I'm away from Huyton, speaking in the country, the bigger my majority. I think that's a tribute to my supporters who worked so hard to get me back.
Wasn't the election was called by many people, in the press anyway, tawdry and boring? Looking back on it, do you think there's anything in these criticisms?
I think it got a bit boring. I think our opponents made the mistake of getting up to fever heat from the first day, and I think the fever heat was a little bit synthetic. And we just went on quite strongly with the line that we were putting in the election. I don't need to repeat it, I've said it so often. I don't think it got very tawdry. I think there was a lot of abuse, which I decided not to reply to. But most people, I think, have thought very seriously about this election. And although I think television played a big part in boring the electors, it certainly did, I think television is equally over the years.
Now what we're going to do is, at this moment, Mr. Wilson is just leaving his Liverpool hotel. Here he is, coming out of his hotel after a very good night's sleep, very clearly. You were seeing him just now at the moment of declaration. Here comes Mr. Wilson now out into the motor car outside that well-known large hotel in Liverpool.
The Prime Minister just getting into his car with Mrs. Wilson. A small crowd, it's raining now. Just before went his father and about 100 pieces of baggage from his personal party, which numbered 20. He'll be moving off soon into the rush hour traffic of Liverpool. The Prime Minister this morning didn't want to add anything further to his statement that he wouldn't be claiming victory until he had 316 seats. Now the Prime Minister moves off, waving in his car. He's turning now into Lime Street. Last election rather, it seemed he went down a one-way street, but this time it looks like he might have to go around the full one-way system of Liverpool. He's out into the traffic now with a police outrider.
Well, there he is, on his way. And if he gets into that one-way traffic in Liverpool, I think what he does is turn right all the way. He does about 8 right turns before he gets up to Lime Street Station. Let's go back on the outside broadcast. We've got better pictures again now.
Yes, in fact, Cliff, he does turn right. We've lost him for the moment, but soon he'll be coming up into Lime Street. His personal driver, Harry Field, who drives him everywhere, is at the moment taking his own car back to London, so he's got a fill-in driver with him. Funnily enough, with the forecasts of his majority perhaps running around 100, it's nice to remember that his hotel room is in fact 100. And there's the Prime Minister moving down Lime Street. On the left you can just see St. George's Hall. He'll have to turn right again, the policeman holding the rush hour traffic. And now he turns into the approach to Lime Street Station. And running up onto the platform alongside the Shamrock Express, which will take him to London in about 3 hours, 25 minutes. If he'd held the election on April the 18th, it would have taken him to London in 2 hours, 35 minutes when the new electrification system opens. There he is coming up alongside the platform. Very few commuters around at this time. They come into other stations in Liverpool rather than Lime Street. They call the train the Shamrock Express because it's timed to meet the Irish boats and usually carries a number of Irishmen to London. We're having trouble with our pictures, but there you can see, just seeing his top hat, Station Master John Craig. He'll be the last station master at Lime Street ever to wear a top hat. The next one will wear a bowler hat. British Rail call it modernisation. I can't see who else is in that scrum. Mr. Wilson posing for pictures. The Prime Minister got to bed about 3:45 this morning after he'd returned from Highton. He had some refreshments and then met lobby correspondents before finally retiring. I still can't see who he is meeting, but there should be rail officials there. There was some thought that the Lord Mayor of Liverpool might come down to see him off. He's a member of the Labour Party on Merseyside. But I cannot see the Lord Mayor at the moment. In fact, we can't see very much because of the flash lamp. I'm sorry for the light in the picture. It's not one of our lights, and in fact it's technically impossible to get the pictures you're getting. The engineers say we couldn't take our roving eye camera under there. We did it last year and it worked. We did it again this year and it works, but the engineers say it's still impossible. It's not too good. It's not our usual quality, but at least it's a picture. I can see members of the Prime Minister's staff, Mr. Alfred Hitchcock, his personal aide, Mr. Gerald Kaufman, his publicity officer. With him on the train will be his father, his sister, and his son.
And now, that was Bob Perrin, incidentally, reporting from Lime Street Station in Liverpool, seeing the Prime Minister off. They're due to leave in about, 30 seconds from now, so it won't be very long. Also, I may say, on that train, we shall have cameras. We hope that when that train gets down to Bletchley, we shall certainly be talking to the Prime Minister. That's if Robin Day gets here in time, if not, some of us will. My colleagues are all suddenly coming to life. It's because it's 8 o'clock in the morning, I think. David Butler is back with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Cliff.
Here, he got stopped by the police last night for driving without a light. He was taking the boss with him, too. So we have no sympathy for you at all. And good morning to you, Mr. Robert Mackenzie.
Good morning, sir. Well, the swing is settling down in the vicinity of 3%, more or less as it was inevitably at the end of last night. Far below the swing that the public opinion polls were talking about, which was an average of 4.5. They're inclined to exaggerate in this morning's papers how accurate they were. In fact, they were pointing to 150 Labour majority. The figure is much more likely to be plus or minus 5 around 100. In other words, this is almost exactly a replay of the election of 1959 in reverse. When the Conservatives under Macmillan got a majority, an even majority of 100, Labour is likely now to have a majority of 100, give or take 5 or 10 seats either way, depending on how things go today in the mainly rural and small town areas to be reporting. Now let's look for a moment at another division of the results of last night's story. Here's the share of vote. 1964, in the seats which have so far counted, which is 461 seats, the share of vote was as follows. Now this time, you'll notice, Labour's share of the vote has gone up slightly from 45.8 to 49.9. This is almost exactly the share of the vote the Conservatives got in 1959. A replay of 1959 in reverse, as I was saying a moment ago. Just under half the vote, likely to go down slightly because of the rural areas coming in today. The Tory share of the vote, fairly stable, down by around 1.6%. The Liberal share also down, although they've so far improved their position in seats by 1 today. Others have gained. This is partly because of a shift in the Republican Labour vote in Northern Ireland. And the turnout down slightly, suggesting that there was a lower interest in the election even than in 1964, which was down on 1959. We could look now, I think, at the opinion poll picture. This was the final story, as told by the opinion polls, at the election day or a few days earlier. Now, the thing to note is that the swing to Labour predicted by the polls was consistently above what in fact has occurred. Research services in the Observer came the closest to the swing as we now know it, though it may vary during the day. But when you projected the swings they were offering to actual likely majorities, you'll notice they ran well ahead of what we're likely to get today. Far ahead in the case of the Daily Express, though it's had a good record of prediction in the past, and well ahead in the case of Gallup and others. You'll watch today, you'll see there's a great tendency to read backwards into history and imply the polls have been dead right as usual. Now, how does this result, which is now impending, of 100, give or take a few, Labour majority, compare with other big wins in this century? Well, here we'll be having in something like 100 plus or minus 5 or 10, and a 49-point-something share of the vote. Very, very similar in reverse, as I say, to the Conservative win in 1959. 100 then, with 49.4% of the vote. So far, Labour has 49.9, but it may glide slightly to something like this figure. And, of course, well below in seats, Labour's win in 1945, when they had going on for 150 majority, although, interestingly enough, that majority was based upon a smaller share of the vote than Labour is likely to get this time. It's often forgotten that it was based on that kind of share of the popular vote. Then, if you look at the 1935 result, again, one of the historic Conservative wins, 249 majority, the 1931 majority of 493 for the national government, the Liberals in 1906, 130. That's sort of the historical background against which one can set the win coming up today for Labour.
Well, I said just now, good morning to you, David Butler. I haven't even heard a word from you, yes?
Well, it seems to me that today we are going to have...
We're going to have a quick look at Mr. Wilson saying goodbye to Liverpool. Oh, he said goodbye to us, too, and he's dived inside there now. Missed him. Oh, no, there he is. Called him up again. Bagpipes and all. These are the scenes at Lime Street Station in Liverpool, where he's catching this train down to London. I always thought that train had to leave at 8 o'clock. Bob Perrin's up there. He'll put me right or wrong, I'm sure. All right, fine. From one station to another. We're going down now to Euston. Some of the people are beginning to come to work in London here, so we'll go down and join Desmond Wilcox to see how many travellers he's been able to stop. Desmond?
Morning, Cliff. And it's here in Euston in 3 or 4 hours' time that Harold Wilson will be coming when he arrives on that train, which is already 5 minutes late. But in the meantime, what do you expect from Harold Wilson's new government with its much increased majority?
I think whoever gets in will be about the same. It'll be the ordinary working class men who'll have to pay for anything that's done for the country.
Well, what do you mean, whoever gets in? Do you believe that the Conservatives could still get in?
Well, if we get another 100% of seats, we probably might do. But
no, there's no doubt about it that you have a Labour government ahead of you for the next 4 or 5 years. Now, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think we've got to accept it. I'm a Tory myself. I'm disappointed, and I would like to see the Tories have another chance.
What do you think has caused the 100 or so majority that Harold Wilson now has?
Well, I think probably a lot of people haven't got any more sense. That's my own view of it.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you, madam, what was your reaction to the fact that you now have a Labour government?
Very disappointed.
Why?
Because I think that the Labour government has only increased taxation, and that although the benefits may seem good at the time, I'm afraid we're going to have to pay for them during the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, it's quite obvious a number of millions of voters didn't feel the same way as you. What do you think caused them to vote a 100 majority to Wilson's government then?
Well, I think people don't think of the ultimate cost. They get the advantages at the moment, and they don't realise that all these things have got to be paid for.
Can I ask you, sir, what's your reaction to this morning's news?
Well, I'm not surprised at all that I'm not at all happy about it.
Why not?
Well, I think Mr. Wilson will now bring out all these little pet theories and rush into nationalisation and a lot of silly things that he's got in his noddle.
You voted Tory, I presume?
Definitely.
What do you think caused everybody to put in as big a majority as this, then?
Well, I think Mr. Wilson certainly put up some very good electioneering. He was definitely had the edge on Mr. Heath. And the people, well, they were undecided, and they were swayed that way.
Would you see him as a bit of an ogre for the next 5 years, then?
Yes, I'm afraid. I've seen this all before. I've seen him rush into things, the Labour Party, as soon as they get in. They rush things through, make a terrible pot mess, and out they go again.
What's your job?
I work in a bank.
How will it affect you personally, then, to have a Labour government for the next 4 or 5 years?
Well, he might nationalise banks, of course, then it would affect me. And
do you really think he'd nationalise banks?
Is one of the things he's got in his mind.
Well, if he's got it in his mind, I've certainly not heard it during the election campaign, have you?
No, he hasn't got it, hasn't mentioned this sort of thing, but they have these various things in their mind before, and they rush with them. I've been caught before with them.
Well, they haven't nationalised your bank, as far as I know. Thank you very much. What's your reaction to this morning's news?
I think it's smashing news, definitely.
You voted Labour, did you?
Yes, I did, and I'm proud of it.
What do you think caused the majority to be so big? Why do you think so many people voted Labour?
Well, because he's done so much for us in the few months that he has been in.
What do you expect him now to do in the future?
Oh, lots, housing. I hope he brings down the income tax a little bit, because that affects me more than anything else.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I can ask you, sir, what's your reaction to this morning's news?
Well, naturally, I'm disappointed because I am a Conservative, but in some respects it might be a good thing.
Why?
Well, I believe that this will give the country the opportunity of finding out whether this chap Wilson is the artful dodger or whether he and his party can really do all the things they say they can do.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Desmond Wilcox, Euston.
There we leave Euston, come back to the studio, and it's time now, I think, to take a look at the state of the parties board. There it is, Labour with 303 seats, Conservatives 151, Liberals 5, others 2.
Am I to talk?
There you are. Nobody's told me that we've come back on. The reason for some of these silences, I may say, is because various areas of the country are having their own reviews at this time, just as we're going to do. We're going to join David Holmes. Oh, David Butler. I'm sorry, somebody said David. You see, we're full of Davids in the studio. It isn't David Holmes this time, it's David Butler.
Well, today we're going to be focusing, there are 170 results to come, but we shall be focusing, in fact, on something like 25 to 30 seats. There are 10 seats that the computer and the statisticians suggest there is a better than even chance of Labour gaining. These are in order of likelihood. South Bedfordshire, High Peak, Southwest Norfolk, that's one of the more doubtful ones perhaps, Monmouth, Yarmouth, Peterborough, Malden, Rushcliffe, Harford and Bedford. Now, if Labour won all those 10 seats and no others, they would end up with 105 majority over all parties. On the current form, they're bound to win a fair proportion of them, and there are 3 or 4 others below the line there. There are also seats which won't affect Labour's majority overall, which are at stake between the Liberals and the Conservatives. 3 or 4 seats in the West Country. Will the Liberals hold on to Bodmin? Will they win North Cornwall? And also 5 or 6 seats, mainly in the north of Scotland. Will the Liberals hold on to their 4 seats in the north of Scotland? Will they make any gains in the northeast tip, where there's a big swing from Conservative to Labour around Aberdeen? Will this affect their fortunes? I think a couple of other points are worth making. One, the turnout in this election is the lowest since the war. In fact, allowing the state of the register, it's the lowest since 1935. Another, that the Labour Party will certainly end up with well below 50% of the vote, but probably a slightly better looking result all told than the Conservatives had in 1959 by a very narrow margin. It is, as Bob Mackenzie has said, a mirror image election of the 59 results. We stopped halfway in 64, we've now gone the full way to the opposite picture of the result in 64. The swing of this election has been much more even than it was in the last election. There has been no seat that has swung by as much as 9% to Labour, and there has been no swing. There have only been 4 or 5 seats that have swung at all to the Conservatives. I think the biggest swing for the Conservatives nominally was in Pembroke against Desmond Donnelly. The next biggest swing, or almost the next biggest swing, was Belper, where in George Brown's seat there was a 1.5% swing to the Conservatives, although there's quite a lot of house building there which may be changing the social composition of the constituency. But by and large, the national average swing of 3.5%, the vast bulk of constituencies with a swing of between 1% to Labour and 5.5%, 6%. Only in Birmingham, Stetchford, Birmingham, Sparkbrook, and 1 or 2 other seats in the West Midlands, you have swings up at 8%.
All right, now, that was David Butler. Let's get our Davids right this time. Now we shall go to David Holmes.
Well, short roundup of some of the things that have happened in the southeast. Of the 42 Labour gains, I think it's 42, 17 of them are here in the southeast. That's because the largest concentration of Conservative marginal seats vulnerable to swing were in the southeast here. What's happened, among other things? Sir Ian Orr Ewing has held on to his seat at Hendon North, but Labour turned out Commander Courtney from Harrow East. They turned out Henry Brooke from Hampstead, turned out Christopher Chataway from Lewisham North and his neighbour from Lewisham West, Dudley Smith from Brentford and Chiswick, Charles Gounod from Uxbridge, but only just in both those seats. In Kent, Dame Patricia Hornsby-Smith was out at Chislehurst. On one side of her, Mr. Heath held on to his seat, Bexley, with his majority halved. The other side of Chislehurst, Eric Lubbock for the Liberals held on to Orpington, his majority halved as well. Incidentally, Orpington registered the country's highest turnout, almost 87%, but we've got to record also that the southeast had almost the lowest turnout in the country in one constituency, that is Stepney, under 51%. Now, back to Cliff.
Well, I must say, I've just picked up the Daily Mirror, and the big headline is Labour landslide. I don't know, we'll have to analyse this word landslide. Oh, I see the sun's got landslide all over it, too. Now, let's go down to Waterloo Bridge and join, I should think down there, it must be Alan Wicker.
They've been talking about this Labour landslide. I've just heard Cliff Michelmore talking about this. Why do you think there has been this landslide?
Well, I don't know. I think it's because the Conservatives have been in all those years, and now they're going to give the Labour a chance.
You voted for Labour, did you?
Yes.
So what's the name of your MP?
Wallace.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Now they're in, and they've had this landslide, as they're calling it. What do you think the party will do for you?
Well, I hope they do what they've promised to do.
Which is what?
Well, the rents and the land purchasing and all that they've promised to do for the old and the disabled. I mean, they are the people that really need it, I think.
When you say the rents, what do you mean by that?
Well, the rents are very high at the moment. I hope they're going to bring them down a bit.
Oh, I see.
And the rates.
They're all down?
Yes,
Well,
I hope so.
What else do you think they'll do?
Or not put them up anymore, anyhow.
Now, why do you think there has been this swing towards Labour this time? Why? What's the reason for it?
I really think that the Conservatives had a long run, and perhaps the people think that Labour ought to have a chance to see what they can do.
Do you think there's a very great difference between the two parties?
Well, I don't know, really. I don't understand a lot about it, but I just don't know.
So why did you vote Labour this
Well,
time?
I've always been Labour. I'm working class, and I've always been Labour.
What difference do you think a strong socialist government would make to you?
Okay, I don't care what it does, like it alters things, you know, and everything runs a bit smoother. I don't mind.
I'm coming this side. I can't hear you quite so well. You say you don't mind what it does?
No,
as long as
it's different, you know, and stick to what they've got to do for
But
us.
what things do you want altered?
Well, there's plenty. It'd take me all day to tell you.
For start?
Well, I'm getting old, soon be getting the old age pension. I
Yes.
suppose it's a bit more pension.
Yes.
And what with the rents and things, I don't think it's fair for old people to pay the rents they're paying. You?
Are you looking forward to anything else?
Well, you know, not live a few years longer.
I hope you will. I'm sure you will. Thank you very much. You, sir, what difference do you think a strong Labour government will make to your life?
Well, I think they'll give us the opportunity to get the economy back onto sound footing so that we really can go to and become something of a power in the country again, in the world again. This is, they really do mean what they say.
Why do you believe there has been this swing?
I think people have generally been satisfied with the results of the last 17 months of Labour government, and they want to give them a chance to finish the job.
Thank you very much. Madam, could I ask you, why do you think we've seen this swing towards Labour?
Well, I don't know. I'm a widow myself with a young daughter, and I think that there's quite a large amount of widows in this country, and we do get our pension, majority of us now, which makes a lot of difference. That's the way we look at it, you know.
Are you expecting to find any great differences?
No, not really.
You don't think there'll be much
it'll go
change?
on much the same as before, yes.
Thank you very much. What about you, sir? I'm asking these people why they think there has been this swing towards Labour.
Well, I think over the past 17 months, Labour have been able to show that they can do something in 17 months. I mean, obviously haven't been able to do much, but they've been do something more than the Tories could do over 13 years.
What are you expecting to happen?
Well, I think Mr. Wilson will now, the country's now shown they've got a mandate, they've given him a mandate, and to carry out his full policies as he wants to.
So what do you want to see?
Well, I want to see him do more for the old people for a start, because I think they deserve to have something done for them. And obviously they've shortened the trade gap, haven't they? And I think they'll carry on and eventually get the country on its feet.
Anyhow, you're well satisfied?
Well satisfied, definitely, yes.
Good. Thank you. Alan Wicker, Trafalgar Square.
In Trafalgar Square? He was never in Trafalgar Square as long as I was never born in London. That was Westminster Bridge, Alan. He still thinks it's Waterloo Bridge. He still thinks it's last night. Right. Now, a quick look at the state of the party's board. Well, they're up. They are the state of the parties. And now, let's catch up with the latest news, which will take you to our newsroom at Alexandra Palace and Michael Aspel.
More early morning reaction from abroad, including the European centres. But the first we had came from the United States, where the issue had been decided even before the Americans' normal bedtime. From New York, Gerald Priestland reports.
In their late-night shows by satellite from London, American TV commentators called Mr. Wilson the British Lyndon Johnson, a political giant, Texas style. The shows, by the way, came from the BBC's election centre and in colour. Another of the commentators remarked, it cannot be disappointing to Washington to have the prospect of another 5 years of the by now familiar Mr. Wilson, Mr. Stewart, and Mr. Healy. And I think that's a very fair assessment of the reaction the White House might be shy to put into words. Many Americans who followed the campaign were struck by the heavy turnout, in their terms, and by Mr. Wilson's presidential approach. But today's New York Times wonders whether Mr. Wilson will be radical enough, and hopes that he'll come round to the Heath view that Britain's future lies in Europe.
Britain's relations with Europe were also an issue on the continent, but the election results' effect on the pound was also of major interest. From Switzerland, a report by Alan McGregor.
First reaction in Zurich is apprehension that the substantial Labour majority may divert Mr. Wilson from the policy decisions needed to make the country pay its way. So, on the Zurich Exchange today, the immediate effect of this feeling is expected to be a weakening of the pound. But not by very much, for the election result has already been discounted in the exchange rate. After that, for a week or so, it's going to be a matter of wait and see. Dealers will hold only the sterling needed for immediate commitments. The rate will drift a bit lower, but no panic. And as soon as the government again displays what one banker called economic realism, the favorable effect will be immediate. He added, we all want to keep the pound where it is, and we just hope that Mr. Wilson, for he seems to know what's needed, will be tough enough.
In Paris, the election result hit the headlines, as our correspondent in Paris, Donald Milner, reports.
The French press this morning hails the election, in the words of Figaro, as not a landslide, but not far short of one. The result comes as no surprise in France, where it had been long predicted, and it appears to be widely welcomed. The emphasis of all the politicians and commentators I've spoken to is on the hope that Mr. Wilson will now lead Great Britain into Europe, but it's not expected that he will make any move in that direction in the near future. There's relief that the electorate has clearly shown its will, and a hope on the part of opponents of the French government that Britain will now assume the leadership of the European half of the Atlantic Alliance. In the words of one commentator, the result gives the British an opportunity to demonstrate that they have a sense of history.
Soccer, and Chelsea are safely through to the FA Cup semi-final for the second year running. Following their 3-1 defeat of Hull last night, they'll next meet Sheffield Wednesday in 3 weeks' time. Manchester United's semi-final opponents depend on the results of the Manchester City-Everton match. Foundations for Chelsea's win against Hull were laid early on when Tambling and Graham scored against the run of play. Simkin put Hull back in the game temporarily, and then Tambling again off Osgood's pass. That clinched it, 3-1, and Hull never looked like repeating Saturday's dramatic recovery. And another overnight result, tennis, and the BBC Two World Professional Championship at Wembley last night was won by the Mexican Pancho Gonzalez. In the semi-finals, he beat Ken Rosewall, 6 years his junior, 13-11. In the other semi-final, Lew Hode lost 3-10 to his old Australian rival Rod Laver, and he in his turn went down 3-6, 7-5, 10-12 to Gonzalez in the final. Officials are meeting at Moscow Zoo this morning to discuss the next step in the case of the reluctant pandas. There'll be talks about whether London Zoo's Chi-Chi may stay at Moscow until the autumn to mate with Annan, the Russian Zoo's panda. Keepers had to rush in with brooms yesterday to stop them from fighting after they'd been put in the same cage together for the first time. That's it. Now the state of the other parties from Cliff Michelmore.